The Dallas Cowboys and Baltimore Ravens each had bad home losses in week 2. Will they bounce back in week 3? We'll break it down here on the Locked On Cowboys and Locked On Ravens podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to this crossover edition of the Locked On Ravens and Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today from Locked On Ravens is Kevin Ostreicher. You can follow him on Twitter at Kevin Ostreicher or at KOstreicher34. Kevin, let's talk about the biggest matchup, or sorry, the biggest storyline going into this game. Both the Cowboys and the Ravens had really tough week 2 outings. So what's the biggest headline in Baltimore?
Yeah, right now it's about the Ravens not falling into an 0-3 hole. I mean, look, we already know the statistics about 0-2 teams since the season expanded. Only 2 teams have made the playoffs after starting 0-2. 32 have started 0-2, and those 2 teams, the 2022 Cincinnati Bengals and the 2023 Houston Texans. So Baltimore already in a tough spot. Now they're traveling down to Dallas, and you mentioned it, Marcus, where both the Ravens and Cowboys are going to be mad coming into this game after how they played in week 2. But for Baltimore, it's the offense. It has to be. Lamar Jackson hasn't played bad by any stretch of the imagination. Certainly hasn't been perfect, but ranks number 1 in total yards, number 1 in rushing yards, and number 5 in passing yards among all quarterbacks through 2 weeks. But he hasn't had a lot of help in terms of his offensive line and his protection. The Ravens ended up replacing 60% of their starters from last season, including guys like Kevin Zeitler, Morgan Moses, and went pretty young at the position. And it's been a struggle for them. They moved right tackle Daniel Falele to right guard, who has, looked flat-footed, hasn't been able to get the job done, and gave up multiple pressures in both weeks to players like Chris Jones and Max Crosby. And for Baltimore, the schedule does not get any easier with Micah Parsons now on the docket and hoping to take advantage of Baltimore's inexperience there. They're doing a rotation at the right tackle position between Patrick McCary and rookie Roger Rosengarten. So the offensive line is the biggest story and the big contention point, because even in the run game, Derrick Henry seems to have a guy on top of him on a lot of these plays where we know Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, they're special players, Marcus, but they can't put on the Superman cape on every single play and do it all by themselves. It all starts up front for an offense right now. While Ronnie Stanley's played well, Tyler Linderbaum looks like Linderbaum, the rest of those guys are struggling.
Yeah, and we should mention Stanley got banged up last week, and Stanley's got a really long injury history. He did not practice on Wednesday. Do you think he'll play on Sunday?
That's the message from Baltimore right now, Marcus. John Harbaugh said after practice he is going to play. So we'll obviously monitor that situation. But John Harbaugh can be pretty tight to the vest with those injury designations. So the fact that he went out there and said, yeah, Ronnie's playing on Sunday, I'd say he's probably out there and ready to go.
I mean, they're going to need him. The Cowboys have one of the best pass rushes in the NFL. Didn't necessarily show that against the Saints last week, but Kevin, one of the big advantages that Baltimore has in this game is that Lamar Jackson has been so doggone good against NFC teams. I believe the stat I saw today, 20-3 all time against NFC teams.
20-1.
21. Is it 21-3?
Yeah.
21-3.
20 wins, 1 loss. That 1 loss coming to your NFC East rival, or maybe not, in Daniel Jones and the New York Giants.
Yeah, it wasn't that one of those weird Sunday morning games in London.
No, it was a 1:00 game. Lamar Jackson made a crossbody throw across the field to Patrick Ricard, out of all people. It was intercepted by the Giants, and they ended up kicking. They scored a touchdown, I believe. I tried to wipe it out of my memory because it was such an ugly game. But it's my favorite, not favorite stat is that the one NFC quarterback to give Lamar Jackson a loss was the one and only Daniel Jones.
Oh, my gosh. So that's the big advantage for Baltimore, right? Like Lamar just does not lose these games. And actually, Kevin, I think it makes sense, right? Like Lamar is so unique and so different compared to every other starting quarterback in the league that when you have an NFC team that faces him, it's really hard to defend him. I even think back to like last year. They played the Lions and Seahawks when both those teams were playing really well in the regular season. and they smoked them. I mean, those were like two non-competitive games. That's my fear here with the Cowboys. Is they've only played Lamar Jackson, I believe, once or twice. And I remember the one game Dallas got absolutely throttled. I'm worried that it could be that way because Lamar is just such a unique talent to defend.
And you're exactly right. Where, these teams that get to play them either once or twice, like his AFC North rivals, they get more experience for just being on the field with them. And honestly, it hasn't necessarily helped the Ohio teams. He still beats up on Cleveland and Cincinnati on a pretty regular basis. But when you're an NFC team, you don't go up against them a lot. It's a different type of preparation. And then once you get into the game, he's so much faster than he looks on tape. He's so much more dynamic than the scout team. We heard Mike McCarthy say that the Cowboys feel really good about Trey Lance, kind of replicating Lamar on the scout team, which I'm just kind of like, oh, well.
I mean, look at the athleticism of the other two quarterbacks in the roster. It's Dak who can't move, and Cooper Rush is even less athletic. I mean, kind of had no other option there.
Yeah, that's their only guy. But, you run through with Trey Lance for the week if you're Dallas and you get on that field, and Lamar's just a completely different beast. And so I think that's the advantage Lamar and the Ravens team has over these NFC teams, is that it's so different when it comes to tape, when it comes to practice first getting out there. And so for a Pittsburgh team that goes out there and faces them twice a year, Lamar hasn't really been able to have a ton of success against them because they're able to key him up and some stuff. But the NFC factor of it is if you don't play him enough and you don't have that, oh, well, this is how he actually is in person, it causes some level of a disadvantage. And so you can try to replicate him with whoever, whether it's Trey Lance, Cooper Rush, whoever it may be, but it will be different come Sunday on the field.
Kevin, I wanted to ask you about this defense really quickly because I've covered the Raiders for a long time. And I thought going into that game last week that the Raiders were going to struggle to get like 14 points. They moved the ball kind of up and down the field through the air. What's missing with this Baltimore defense that just doesn't look the same compared to last year?
It's honestly, Marcus, it's flipped based off of expectations. A lot of people were worried about the pass rush and, them losing Jadeveon Clowney and having it off always step up and David Ajabo. And everyone was saying, well, is this pass rush going to be able to replicate their success? But in the secondary, it's okay. You got Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Stevens, Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams. You're fine there. But the pass rush has been really good, and the secondary has been the weakness here. Baltimore, it's very clear they are the best rush defense in the league in terms of total yards. Haven't even given up 100 total yards on the ground yet. They're at 99. But they're last in the league in total yards given up through the air. And part of that has been miscommunications. Part of that has been they have been a little bit banged up there with players like Nate Wiggins having to miss last week. We saw Kyle Hamilton has practiced on Wednesday with a back injury, and there were a couple of plays where he was favoring his shoulder in that Raiders game. So is he 100% right now? But they're dealing with a new defensive coordinator in Zach Orr, who I expect to have a really good career as a coach, but he's never called plays before. He's 2 games in now. It's kind of a similar trajectory to what we saw in Baltimore with Mike McDonald, who also, he had called plays in Michigan under Jim Harbaugh when he went there for a year, but the NFL, he had to adjust to it. And that Miami game in week 2 a couple of years ago, Baltimore blew that 28 fourth quarter lead. It was just, you adjust and then you get better. So as time goes on, it will get better, I feel like. But, you have questions about Marlon Humphrey, who played decently well, but has given up a touchdown or 2. And then you have others as well, like Brandon Stevens, who certainly had his welcome to the NFL moment this season with Devontae Adams matched up on him a lot. So Marcus Williams has struggled. Roquan Smith hasn't had the Roquan Smith start that people anticipated. So some definite growing pains. But if anything, this pass rush with other guys like Nnamdi Madubuike, Travis Jones, and the guys I mentioned has been dominant, which is, I guess, masked some of the secondary's issues, but obviously hasn't been able to mask enough.
Yeah, we'll see how this Cowboys offense performs against Baltimore's defense. I've got some concerns about the Cowboys offensive line going up against their pass rush, but I would assume if Dak can get a nice pocket that he's going to find open receivers in this secondary. Kevin, let's talk about the Cowboys side of things because after giving up 6 straight touchdowns to the Saints, things aren't going great in Dallas, as you would assume. We'll talk about the Cowboys next. This episode is brought to you by Arena Club. For most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 on a Josh Allen rookie card or Patrick Mahomes rookie card just isn't in the cards. Listen, I love collecting cards. Anybody that's followed me on Twitter for forever knows that I love collecting cards, but that's some serious money to drop. But thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, now it's possible to score gem mints for a fraction of their retail price. Every card that I listed was hit from last week's Arena Club pack, drop pack. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all the possible cards that can be hit, and clear hit rates for each one. I've used Arena Club several different times. I hit a really nice Jahmyr Gibbs rookie card a couple weeks ago. I absolutely love it. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack game. After your pulls are revealed, they'll immediately be placed in your showroom for safekeeping, selling, trading, or auction. If you want them delivered to your house, just have them shipped right to your house. It's cheap, it's affordable, and they arrive really quickly. Right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL. That is arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL. Promo code LockedOnNFL for 10% off your first purchase. Welcome back to this crossover edition of the Locked On Ravens and Locked On Cowboys podcast. We're going to discuss the biggest headlines coming out of Dallas going into week 3. And Kevin, it's their defense. Now, there's parts of their defense that I'm not concerned about. Their cornerback room is fine. Their safeties had a terrible game. They'll be fine. The linebackers, but the biggest concern is their defensive line. They got blown off the ball this week. Jordan Phillips was awful. He popped up on Wednesday with an injury report, got put on the IR list with a wrist injury. He insists that he had no wrist injury. I think it's one of these things like, hey, buddy, you've got a wrist injury that you need to go sit for 4 weeks and get yourself in shape. Mozzie Smith has a back injury. We'll see if he's able to play this week. Linval Joseph, their 35-year-old defensive tackle, was terrible. I am really concerned about Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson just running the crap out of the ball on Sunday, and the Cowboys never being able to use their pass rush. And we talked about Baltimore's offensive line, right? Like, they've got issues all on their offensive line. But if they're able to run the ball and protect Lamar Jackson from having to take these true pass sets, the 5-7 step drops, I'm not so sure how they're going to get off the field.
And that's a big point, because with the Ravens, they can work play action. If they decide they want to do it, which they should, they just haven't. But if they decide they want to work play action off of this, if they can find some early success on the ground here, and they can work Derrick Henry and make Dallas fear him, if they can get some maybe options working with Lamar takes off and scrambles for some first downs. The Ravens ran, Marcus, play action on 12.8% of their plays in week 2, which is very low considering the personnel that they have and what they should be doing on the offensive side of the ball. John Harbaugh has made it very clear there'll be more of an emphasis on that. And at practice on Wednesday, we saw clips of Lamar Jackson practicing some of the play action looks. Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to be a big part of what they do, because we've seen it in spurts, both in week 1 against Kansas City and in week 2 against Las Vegas, where they've established some level of a rhythm with their running game at certain points in the game. And then they work play action off of that in their heavy personnel, which features guys like Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. They have Patrick Ricard out there as well. And you have to adjust your personnel if you're a defense based off of that. And if you're so worried about the run and you have to stack the box up to try to commit more to that, and Lamar hits you with a play action or an RPO, whatever you want to say, you can just have Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely work off of that one-on-one. If Zay Flowers is one-on-one, you can have that happen as well. And we saw multiple plays where there was an option, and the edge defender who was responsible for containing and making sure he makes the right read either shot up at Lamar, where Derrick Henry gets the ball and it's just the defender out of the play, or he freezes linebackers, freezes safeties because they want to cheat up on the potential option. And then we saw in week 2, Zay Flowers wide open for a touchdown on that play. Yep. So that to me is why establishing the run against what you said, Marcus, is a weak, at least what we saw, a weak defensive line for Dallas right now is one of the most important parts. Then it's about also, can the Ravens establish something against how Dallas wants to defend Lamar Jackson? Yeah. And I know we heard Micah Parsons talk a lot about that over the course of the last couple of days, saying that, you always got to find a way to keep him in the pocket. Don't let him get that extra stuff. Maybe throw a spy in there on some critical third downs. Maybe he himself will spy Lamar Jackson. Who knows? But those are all ways that Dallas has to try to defend Lamar. But even in the pocket, if he gets that protection, one of the age-old criticisms of Lamar, he can't throw in the pocket, he can't do it, which is so old and so overused now, because he can. But teams want to have that option as opposed to the, oh, he'll just scramble around on us and pick up 16 yards every single run. But again, if you leave him in the pocket and he has protection, he will go through his reads and he will dice you up that way too.
Here's my fear. We saw in the second half against the Saints last week, the Cowboys used like more 5-man fronts. And unfortunately, with some of those 5-man fronts, it was Jordan Phillips, Mozzie Smith, and Linval Joseph. And that's 330 pounders out there. And none of those guys really could move all that well. I mean, especially the two older guys, right? So if you load up and put bigger defensive tackles on the field to try to stop the run, I'm just not sure how you're going to be able to contain Lamar Jackson, right? You're just not going to have anybody in the interior that can quickly go out and try to stop him or close down a rushing lane. So my guess, Kevin, is they're actually going to do the opposite of what they did last week. I think they're going to go smaller on the interior defensive line. And you're going to see a lot of Oso Digizua and Chauncey Golston to try to get more athletes on the field and try to corral Lamar Jackson that way and try to get more pass rush. But I do think if this turns into a shootout, right? And this is a game where Lamar Jackson is, I'm not saying passing the ball 35 times, but taking 35, 40 dropbacks. That's how this Cowboys pass rush is going to win, because what they'll do is they'll try to isolate Micah Parsons against your worst offensive lineman. And I think for Baltimore, it's probably Daniel Falele, if not Roger Rosengarten, right? And they'll use Micah Parsons' quickness to try to disrupt Lamar Jackson. So it's for Dallas, it's all about getting into a positive game script and making Baltimore be not one-dimensional, but making them have to drop back and try to pass that way.
Yeah, and I think it's also important that they get other people involved. I mean, Rashad Bateman had a pretty critical mistake in that Raiders game where the ball bounced off of his hands into Robert Spillane's arms for an interception. And it was a great play by Jacorian Bennett as well to kind of get all in that play. But for the Ravens, we saw Zay Flowers kind of voice his displeasure on social media. He reposted a fan saying that the Ravens went away from him in the second half after he kind of cooked Las Vegas in the first half. So, you know, kind of the situation with him, they need to get him involved early and often. He had 11 targets in that Raiders game.
Is this the squeaky wheel gets the grease type of game maybe for Zay Flowers?
It could be. I mean, I know a lot of people in Baltimore, when they saw that, is obviously back when Marquise Brown was still a member of the team, he went to Twitter and voiced his displeasure all the time. So we're like, we don't want to have that happen again here with Zay Flowers, who's a heck of a player. But I think that for the Ravens, the deep ball passing game is going to be such a key for them. They haven't taken a lot of deep shots this season. Lamar Jackson was an average deep ball passer his first couple years in the league. Wasn't great, but wasn't awful.
No.
He's been towards the bottom of the league in the past couple of years with that. He's missed a couple of throws already so far this season deep. If you can hit on a deep shot or two early in this game, if you're the Ravens, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in the final part of the show too, Marcus, but that to me is a great way to kind of pair, okay, well, if Dallas has to start cheating up in the run game, well, what if you hit a deep shot? Then they have to start worrying about that, where if you can't do that, Dallas is like, oh, okay, now we can kind of not worry about that, and they don't have that momentum early. So that to me is a big part of it for Baltimore on offense as well.
And the last thing I want to mention on the Cowboys side of things is their offense, their passing offense has been fine. I know Dak had 2 interceptions last week, but they got behind so much that he was pressing. My real concern is the run offense, and whether you want to blame it on the running backs or whoever, they are not running the ball well. And I have a sneaky suspicion against Baltimore with their front, they're probably not going to run the ball well. They're probably not going to be efficient, but can they at least be average and give a threat of a rushing attack? Can they convert 3rd and shorts when they need to? Can they get 4 yards on first down to set up easier second down passes for Dak? That's what I want to see in this game. And I also want to see who's running the ball. Ezekiel Elliott was not effective at all. He's the only running back in the league with 10 or more carries that has yet to break a tackle. I like Rico Dowdle. I think he probably deserves some more work, but the Cowboys have got to get this running game figured out. And Kevin, I'm worried about Baltimore's front that they might not be able to do that.
The absolute craziest storyline that could come out of this game, I know it's not going to happen. Jerry Jones, Mike McCarthy kind of, already have said this is probably not happening, but the Dalvin Cook revenge game. The Dalvin Cook revenge game. I know it's not happening, but it would be the craziest thing. But you're right. Baltimore's run defense has been incredible this season. I know we talked about that earlier, but it is about making an offense one-dimensional and not having to worry about Dowdle or Zeke Elliott to go out there and gash you. Yep. Baltimore's defensive front doesn't concern me a lot. I know, with this Dallas team, getting them off the field is going to be really important for them, because we saw the big part of what the Ravens want to do is eliminate one part of your offense. You can take the short and intermediate stuff. You're not going to beat them deep. And then if you get down to the red zone, it's about being able to just hold them there, kick field goals, and look, two great kickers. This is a great kicker matchup, by the way, between Dallas and Baltimore. But I think with Dallas's rushing offense, that's part to me where if that gets going for them, I think you might be in a bit of trouble if you're the Ravens, because I think it hasn't been wonderful to start the season. And if you get momentum on that side, if you're Dallas, I think that could feed the rest of your offense into being a more well-oiled machine.
All right, Kevin, let's talk about what each team needs to do on Sunday to come away with a win. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. It is the only sportsbook that I use when it comes to making my NFL picks. The Ravens right now are currently 1-point favorites on the road in Dallas. Find that interesting. Go check out all of the week 3 lines available over at FanDuel. But we actually have something a little bit different for you this week. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you're going to be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. For someone like me, a Cowboy fan living in Pennsylvania, it's a necessity. I love Sunday Ticket. It's absolutely fantastic. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. This Crossover Thursday episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, Kevin, let's talk about the 3 things the Ravens need to do to win this game. What are they?
First of all, get out to an early lead. I think, to me, with what this Ravens team has done over the first 2 weeks, it's been offensive inconsistency, which has been a little bit of an issue for them, where they'll either start fast, like we saw in week 1, they go up 5 carries to Derrick Henry, score, touchdown, or it's the other part of it where you start slow and then you find something and then it kind of falls off after that. So a consistent 60 minutes of football with a fast start on the offensive side of the ball, and obviously that does include protecting Lamar Jackson, opening up rushing lanes on the offensive line like we talked about earlier. The second thing is late game execution and just situational and game awareness in general. John Harbaugh has taken a lot of flack over these first 2 weeks, and a lot of it deserved for his game management. Obviously, in that Raiders game in week 2, challenged a pretty obvious Devontae Adams catch, lost them a timeout in the second half, and they needed that timeout in order to give the offense enough time to drive down the field to try to tie and win the game. They didn't have it. And so there's been a lot of that. The Ravens, in their fourth quarter leads, they've blown more fourth quarter leads in the last 5 years than any team. The Raiders hadn't won a game being down 10 plus points in the fourth quarter in 49 games, but the Raiders got that lucky number 50 against Baltimore. So if they're up in the fourth quarter, you have to be able to shut the door on this Dallas team. You can't let any momentum in, because we saw in that week 2 game, it was just time after time, play after play. You could see the momentum slipping away from the Ravens. And the final thing is, don't let CeeDee Lamb beat you. If he's able to play in this game, he's the guy that you have to be able to cover. He's the guy you have to be able to take out of the game plan. Now, that's much easier said than done. CeeDee's a heck of a player, and I still expect him to go and get his. But against the Raiders, it was, well, stop Devontae Adams, and Devontae had over 110 yards and a touchdown. So make a guy like Brandon Cooks beat you. Make a guy like Jalen Tolbert beat you. If Jalen Ferguson, if you got Jake Ferguson, if he's a guy that plays, make him stop. Make him be the guy that beats you. Or the run game, even that. But if CeeDee Lamb beats you, that's the guy that can and will eliminate the Cowboys' best player. And that, to me, at least gives you a shot, and you're okay with someone else being the guy that beats you at the end.
And then, Kevin, on the Cowboys side of things, they've got to find a way to get to 3rd and long. Last week, it's hard to believe, the Saints had 1 third down in the entire first half. Wow. 1, and it was 3rd and short. Mike Zimmer is one of the best defensive coordinators in the league when he gets to 3rd and long, and he can design some of his exotic rushes. Now, he's not going to blitz a lot, but what he's going to do is show 6 or 7 blitzers, drop 3, and then send 4 in all these crazy directions. Last week, they weren't able to do any of that stuff because they never got the 3rd down. They never got the Saints into obvious passing situations. So whether that means run blitzing on early downs, however you can get the Lamar Jackson and the Ravens into some of these 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 8s, you're going to have a chance to win on defense. On offense, I get the feeling, Kevin, that this is not going to be a game in which the Cowboys put up 450 yards, 500 yards. It's going to be you're going to get 3 red zone drives. You better convert on all 3 red zone drives into touchdowns. Last week, the Cowboys had to settle for too many field goals inside the 20-yard line because of sacks, fumbles, drop passes, miscommunications. You have to be more effective in the red zone. It's been a problem for the Cowboys early on this year. It was a problem for the Cowboys early on last year. So you are at home. Take advantage of those red zone opportunities. And the last thing, and this is probably the most important, one of the disturbing trends about this Cowboys team is when they get up in a game, they start to roll, right? Like they have all the confidence in the world. And that's why you see so many blowouts. And it's why you see this Cowboys team have one of the highest point differentials in the league each and every year. Baltimore's up there as well. But when things go poorly, they tend to let it snowball, right? The offense starts to press if the defense gives up back-to-back touchdowns. The defense starts to be over-aggressive, and that's when they get beat with plays down the field. The Baltimore Ravens are a good team. I know the record doesn't say that, but we know they're a good team. They're going to make some plays. They're going to score some points. Don't feel like the game is over if you give up 10 points in the first 20 minutes. Don't let things snowball. Try to keep this close and see if you can steal a game at home at the end.
Yeah, and that's going to be big for both teams. Is we could very well see this come down to the kicker matchup, and either one of those guys. I know Justin Tucker is 1 for 7 from 50+ yards, and dating back to last season. But these are 2 of the best kickers in the NFL, and this could be a game that comes down to the wire. But it's going to be on both teams to not get caught up in the early game. Obviously, it's important to go up early, but I mean, this is football. This is the NFL. Anything can happen, and both these teams are talented, but obviously Dallas doesn't want to fall into a 1-2 hole. And of course, Baltimore, that 0-3 hole kind of feels like a, pretty big blow to your season if it comes to that.
Yeah. I would love to see this turn into a kicker battle. That'd be really fun. I believe I'm gonna have to double check the stats, but I believe Brandon Aubrey is 3 for 3 on kicks over 60 yards in his NFL career, which is pretty crazy. He actually against Cleveland, in Cleveland, hit a 66-yarder, but the Cowboys called timeout before he made the kick. Pretty incredible. I get the feeling, Kevin, that we're going to get one outrageously long kick in this game. What do you think?
Man, yeah, these to me are the 2 best kickers in the league. Yeah. I think we have to. A 60+ yarder.
Oh, it's coming, right? Like
I think we might see one from each kicker. Right? I know Tucker's been struggling, and I know that the confidence in him for a lot of the fan base is down. Not me personally, but just it's been tough. Maybe we see it. Maybe that's a bold prediction I'll throw out. 60+ yard field goal for each kicker in this game.
There you go. I like the idea of one made field goal above 60 yards. I would like to see what kind of odds we can get from FanDuel on that. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys and Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out the new Locked On NFL Now with 2 shows every single day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks you off in the morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. Then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Go check out Locked On Ravens. You can go follow Kevin on Twitter at Kevin Ostrager34. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy this awesome week 3 matchup, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.